Welcome to the Big Kids Book Club. A podcast about all things fictional from middle grade to young adult. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hey, welcome back to this week's edition of the Big Kids Book Club. I'm your host, my name is Marcus, and with me this week in the clubhouse, I have my two lovely friends. I have Rab. How you doing, Rab?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you doing yourself, Marcus?
I'm pretty good. We're also joined by Emma. Hi, Emma.
Hello. How's it going?
It is all good. So, September. Since when is it September already? When did that happen?
Oh, it's mad, isn't it? It's like you fell asleep in March and it's just been politics and updates and news, and then it's September and we're going back to school.
It would have been great to have fallen asleep in March, wouldn't it? To step through it all and to wake up and be like, what a horrible dream. What a horrible now gone away dream.
Oh, if only. But I do like the idea of hibernating for 6 months. I think Animal Kingdom has got it right. I think we've evolutioned our way out of a sweet deal there. But we can talk about human evolution another day. Let's leave Darwin aside. Today, Emma, you have sort of hit the nail on the head. We are looking at back to school. It's that time of year where summer starts to end and it gets grey and grizzly. It does here in England, although that's pretty much summer too. But you end up going back to school for a lot of people, whether it's us big kids, maybe we go back to university or, college, whatever we're doing. Or if we're working with kids, we're teachers now, God forbid. But for a lot of people, the sort of middle grade YA target audience, they are going back to school. And obviously that means they spend a lot of their time in school. So makes sense. So many books on school. But what is the big appeal when you spend so much time in school? Like, I remember I hated school. So what's the big appeal, do you think? We'll start with you, Emma. What is the big appeal for kids, do you think, to have books set in school, even though they're spending all their time in school?
I think it's probably the relatability of it, if I can use that word. Yeah. I did, when I was researching into my dissertation, I found that a lot of kind of students in the GCSE age are usually given kind of the literary canon of English literature. So kind of books like the Shakespeare, the Jane Eyres, the Great Gatsbys, that kind of thing, which are all obviously masterpieces in their own right. But then you think, okay, I've got a 16-year-old boy or girl here who's living in the 21st century reading about Jane Eyre. And where's you can't sympathize with that. How is a person born in our age supposed to sympathize with that? So my guess would be just the authors are just kind of after, reaching out to their audience in that way. If their target audience is indeed the kind of young adult, then they want to write about things that the young adults will be able to relate to and really kind of get their teeth stuck into, because, they've been there, they've lived it.
What about you, Rab? I know you tend to work with a lot of young people, so you're probably closer to understanding what it's like in school these days. Do you echo those sort of thoughts and feelings that Emma's going on about there?
I definitely echo it in terms of relatability. Writing within a setting where the young readers can imagine it and can picture the setting and can see themselves being part of it. That's definitely one reason for writing in schools. I think another is that, and you said about working with young people, this is definitely something I see, but that school is the perfect place for conflict. If we think about what drives a book forward, if we think about what makes a book exciting to read, it's always that conflict that a character faces and how they grow through facing it. So one that's a relatable conflict for young people. In terms of in schools, you've got everyone's locked in together, no matter if they get along, no matter if they want to be in the same place as each other. They have to face things sometimes together and sometimes against each other. So if you've got people you don't get along with, if you've got the people that you perceive as your bullies, or if you've got the people who are the antagonists in your life, in most other situations, there's some way of sort of avoiding it. Whereas that classic literature thing of having people come together and then see what happens when everyone's in the same place is what can go on in a school. It's Lord of the Flies in a building, isn't it?
I really like that's a great analogy, and I think you tap on a lot of the things there with conflict. And also one thing I would say is the characters. You have so many characters in a school setting, like you've touched on some of them. You'll have the cool kids, you have the preppy kids, you'll have the sporty kids, you have the bully kids. I think we're all always looking for like a certain clique, like a clique that we fit into, or we sort of, again, going back to the relatability, we see ourselves in. So I think school has all those people, and there's always a clique for you to join, whether it's in your own school or maybe it's a fictional school. And I think that's the escapism as well. I'm going to touch on this now, and I want to brainstorm the idea with you. The idea of, I don't know about you, like I said, I didn't really enjoy school much, but I did like the idea of going to a different school, one that maybe wasn't quite like mine. And the idea of magical schools or schools with a sort of magical realism to them seems to be really popular as well. Biggest one, of course, is everyone's waiting for their letter to go to Hogwarts. But also stuff like maybe Camp Half-Blood, which isn't a traditional school, but it's kind of a school in a sense. All these different sort of like school-based scenarios where everyone has like a perfect fictional school. So I was wondering if you firstly agree that fictional schools are better than real schools, and also wanted to ask if you could go to any school in the written world, where would you go? Let's go back. We'll do a reverse. So Rab, I'm coming back to you first.
For any school, going on the magical theme, I think I'd go from the school from The Worst Witch. I nearly picked The Worst Witch as one of my books today, but I decided not to go for it. But there's something wonderful in, that was old school magic. That was Black Cat on the end of a broomstick magic. And I think there's something really fantastic about that. It's interesting how often, in terms of the escapism, we go for boarding schools. There's something, I think, for young people, that idea of being able to go somewhere completely away from where all the problems are. But then because we look for literature that lets us explore things in our own lives, it's funny that we bake that escapism, go off to this whole new boarding school, and then in the boarding school, they put those same problems there. Any story of a magical school always has the people that you don't get along with in the school, and the teacher who's too strict, and the teacher, maybe the people who help you as well, like the teacher who's the friendly teacher, or the people who are your friends at the school. So they take along, we escape, and then we put in aspects of our real life into it as well. I wonder if there's something in that a bit like science fiction, where if we take something out of the real world and put it into the fictional world, it's more safe to explore it. If you look at something in a world where it's a bit more magical, you could explore issues like friendships that actually might be a bit close to the bone and hard to explore if you make it too realistic. I think there's definitely something in escapism that it lets us look at things that can be hard topics in real life.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that does hit quite a nail on the head. Interesting, actually, yeah, the way you've picked up, and it has sort of opened my eyes a little bit, that they do tend to be boarding schools. And I think there is almost, if you are middle grade age, young adult reader, sometimes the idea of just getting away from your entire surroundings. And the idea is boarding school does almost like drop you Narnia style into a completely new world. And I think new world, new surroundings. But Emma, what about you? Do you have a particular favorite fictional school, and is there sort of like anything that you've picked up that you say, this is what I see, school really delivering, as sort of Rabs did there?
I would say that's a bit of a tough one. I mean, obviously, having grown up with the Harry Potter series and, remembering the midnight releases and standing in line at the store to open the massive boxes of the massive books that they eventually turned into. And just thinking Hermione was the best, role model for young girls at that age. Obviously, Harry Potter is a massive one for me. But for argument's sake of not picking the obvious choice, I would say probably the school in Perks of Being a Wallflower, just because I think it's, you've got that group of friends of Charlie and Sam and Patrick, and it's a very mundane school. Nothing particularly exciting happens there. And yet throughout the book, you get to know these brilliant people, and it's almost like these kind of extraordinary kids living in a completely mundane and ordinary world, but just finding those kind of like special moments within it. And I think in the film adaptation, one of my favorite scenes is at the very end of the film, where they're all in the truck and Charlie stands up at the back of the truck and he's going through the tunnel and it's like he's flying kind of thing. And that's something that you could totally imagine a bunch of teenagers going out and doing on a Friday night just because there's nothing else to do. And I think this is probably going to sound ridiculously cheesy, but I think there's a little bit of magic in finding the magic of your everyday and, having that relationship with those people at that age and making the boring exciting, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you sort of going to why do we lose ourselves in books? Because we want to find something magical in the normal, I can't, overactive imaginations are us. That's kind of the idea of the book nerds. We do absorb books at a rate of pace because we love just finding new ways of reimagining our world, and the idea that other people have gone out there and created stories with their reimaginings. Boom. So for me, when you are in that sort of day-to-day drudgery, maybe you just want something to sort of like put a sort of spanner in the works. And so I think the idea of having quirky schools or magical schools or et cetera, sort of weirder schools, can just imagine like, oh man, I would, take me away from this English exam or maths test and stuff like that, which you're stuck doing. For me though, I one school I would love to go to, but I'm always a bit more of a sci-fi fan, is I would love to do Aurora Legion from Aurora Rising, grow up, learn how to be like a space pilot and stuff like that. I wish it was the year 3000. We had spaceships and stuff like that. I'm just a big sci-fi geek in that respect. Although it is quite a sort of military school, and I don't know how well I do in a military school. I don't think I got discipline for military school.
Yeah, just a tad.
You went dangerously close to a Busted song when you were talking about wanting to be in the year 3000.
Yeah, I know. I pulled it back. I saved myself. And but that's why I think there is so many school-based stories out there, and some of the best series as well. I think the idea that, when you have books that tend to be released on a yearly schedule, and if you can find a series, especially in the sort of middle grade region, where kids are growing up year by year and your characters are growing up year by year alongside them, and there's this interweaving of like, they go up a year, you go up a year, there's a synergy there that I think younger readers really can latch onto. And I think that's why I think a lot of the good school-based stories are serial, if that makes sense. I don't know if you guys agree with me or not.
I think I'm quite a fan of the serial school-based stuff as well. I think there have been good examples of stories that do that. We've talked a little bit about Harry Potter. I've got mixed feelings on Harry Potter, but I think one thing that I do find really impressive with it is how the books mature as the series go on. The difference between sort of Philosopher's Stone, then to Prisoner of Azkaban, then to Order of the Phoenix, it does feel like people growing up, and I think that's very impressive.
Yeah, Rob, I completely agree with that. I think one of the best things about having that kind of serial release is that the kids that are then reading them, or the teenagers that are then reading them, feel like they're growing up with the books as the books are growing up. And I think, if you can write a good book that appeals to that age group, then you're going to have a continuing fan base as your books then mature. Like you said, Rab, about the Harry Potter series, J.K. Rowling hooked so many people with that first book, and then that entire generation just followed it. So, I mean, I certainly enjoyed it when I was younger. One thing I remember latching on to very, very much so, although not necessarily school related, but was the Spiderwick Chronicles. And they were just, teeny books, kind of like 100 pages, wouldn't take me any time to get through now. But just remembering them coming out every year just kept me hooked and ready for the next one.
It brings me to mind of the Animorphs series. I don't know if either of yourselves have come across the Animorphs that came out in the 90s. It was like introduction to literature in some ways. There was 54 Animorph books, not counting the special editions and extra things that they did. I do think K. Applegate, who wrote it, worked with some ghostwriters as well. It was 6 different characters, and it would follow a different character in each book, so you were getting different perspectives as you read. What the Animorphs did, and it probably, even in that, it matured as it went along slightly, but it did hold almost the same age as it went through, and that's the other sort of magic thing you can get. That's almost the opposite end of the stick. You get some books where the characters sort of age as they go through, and other books where you almost feel like you're capturing a particular point in life, and it hold like the Animorphs throughout are idealistic teenagers, each with kind of their own strong views. They definitely mature as characters, but there's something where almost it feels like it's holding a certain point of time, and you can get that in book series as well. Where you can have a series of, however, like The Outfit, which is a great middle grade series about a set of young people sort of solving mysteries. They're always the same age, and they're always sort of facing the same things, but it's like they're captured at this beautiful crystallized point of time. So you get both options, either like a growing, maturing series that grows with the reader, or something that always can bring you back to that same age. And I think there's definitely a place for both.
Yeah, I think really that's you speak about sort of like how holding that sort of time capsule of youth, and I do think that's why as older readers there's some like really nice sort of recapturing of our lost youth when we read sort of books set in schools. And like I said, I didn't really enjoy going to school, but I love reading books that are set in schools. So I'm trash for them. So yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with the idea that those series can really build, and hold a place strong in our hearts as we move forward. And we're actually going to talk about some of our favorite book ones. So maybe some of those books will come into mention, because we'll be back in our next section. We're going to take a quick break right now. I think that we had some great points there. In our next section, we're going to be talking about some books set in schools, our back to school books, as we like to call them. Like we did last week with our summer reads, we'll be talking about one book that we've read, which we absolutely loved, and another book we're looking forward to reading. So stick around. Welcome back to the show. It's post-production Marcus here. So I'm currently editing the podcast, and turns out the next segment goes on for a wee bit longer than I realised. It seems that Rab, Emma and myself managed to keep on talking for about another half an hour. So that would make this podcast like really long. So I've decided to snip it in half, and so we're doing it in 2 sections in September. We'll be doing this week's, obviously, released for you to listen in your lovely ears, and then we'll be releasing the second one. Part 2 will be coming out in another couple of weeks' time, just before the end of the month. However, I do want to say that it is bumper packed full of giggles and laughs and all sorts of good stuff, so definitely do stick around and catch up with it. If you haven't heard of any of our other content otherwise, we got a ton of stuff. Obviously, we got last month's show, which was just as much fun. Our first in this sort of like trifecta format between me, Emma and Rab. Not only that, I managed to speak with Thomas Taylor, author of Malamander and Gargantis, and we had a great time speaking to him about his writing journey from like illustrator to, middle grade, and his whole sort of like taking time away from writing and then finding the inspiration like lying underneath. So it was a really great interview. I highly recommend it. You can find his interview, again, it's on Spotify and iTunes. You can find it if you just search Big Kids Book Club. We're also on a load of other different sort of podcasting platforms. So no matter where you're listening to all your podcasting goodness, you'll probably be able to find us. Just search Big Kids Book Club. But yeah, so this week we are going to wrap it up nicely here. Like I say, go check it out. Check out the interview with Thomas Taylor. We've got some cool stuff. If you want to keep up to date with everything that we're doing, all the different shows, because we've got more author interviews coming up. So we've got some really cool sort of behind the scenes with possibly your favorite author in the pipeline. So keep up to date with everything. On Twitter is probably our best social media platform. It's where we post most often, and that's at Big Kids Book Club. All one word, at Big Kids Book Club. You can also find me, if you just want to chat to me, Marcus, you can find me on Twitter as well. It's just at author_MJ Henson. Rab's not here, but I will fill in for him. So you want to chat to Rab about all his bookish stuff. I know he's got his book that he's working on that's coming out next year and all that sort of cool stuff. You can find him at Rabtails on Twitter. And then if you want to chat to Emma about her sort of bookish interests, you can find her at EmmaKeen10. But that's all we have time for this week. So we have to say goodbye from the clubhouse. But until next time, keep on reading.